In the words of my sister trying a pumpkin spice latte, it was good, but it's not great. Putting this directly onto Ben Hope, essentially drafting the invoice that I'm gonna have to send for the therapy that I'm gonna need. More books with complicated sister relationships. Hey besties, it's Joel, and this week I'm going to be reading books from the bookshelf of Heartstopper's Charlie Spring. I am really excited to be doing this video because I really wanted to do another Heartstoppery type video, and the opportunity to do this just kind of fell into my lap because of certain things that I'll go into later, but I really wanted to do another one, and I didn't want to wait all the way till season 2 to do another Isaac video, and so now we have this novella installment in the series, and so I'm really excited to see what all of these books have to offer. And also, most importantly, to see if Charlie actually has taste. I hope you're all doing very well and that you're looking after yourselves. If you've yet to grab that drink of water, please do so. We must remain well and hydrated. And if you've yet to check out my Instagram nor my Twitter, I would highly recommend you go do that as well, because I post some extra bookish content that you're not gonna see here. To give you a bit of a backstory, with the massive reception that Heartstopper got, and it was massive, it's been renewed for seasons 2 and 3, so many people have been watching it, and there's definitely been a massive addition to the Heartstopper fandom, which has been amazing to see, and I think I've definitely felt some of that as well with a lot of you following me now. Given the success of Heartstopper on Netflix, Waterstones had decided to do an installation in their children's section of Charlie's bedroom. Now, I've been able to see it 3 times because initially it was only supposed to be there until the 10th of July, and then I think it got extended all the way until the end of August, and then I think it might even get another extension. I don't even know, because it's just been popular for people to go and see and explore Charlie's bookshelf, explore his bed, and just the bedroom installation in and of itself. It's just been amazing, and as soon as I saw this installation, I saw the bookshelf of books, and I was like, that would make a very interesting video. It's definitely an amazing kind of experience to kind of see Charlie's bedroom as reflected in the TV show. I think it was just awesome to have this installation, and I think it definitely adds a sense of connectivity to the series as a whole. And so yeah, I basically decided I'm gonna pick 4 books from Charlie's bedroom and read them. But I think especially as Charlie begins to read more fiction, and especially reading queer fiction as well, I just feel his future self will be more affirmed in his identity and more solidified in his queerness. It's just gonna be so great with him and Nick just being openly queer and stuff in their future lives, as Alice Oseman has shared with us. But speaking of our future selves, have you actually ever wanted to write a letter to them? Well, I may just have the thing you're looking for with Future Me, who have very kindly sponsored today's video. Since 2002, Future Me has sent over 12 million letters to future selves, allowing people to set aside time for mindfulness. With Future Me, you're able to write your future self a letter on their website or their mobile app, and then you can choose any date for it to be sent to you, so it could even be tomorrow or a year or 10 years in the future. Your letter can remain private, or you can actually post it publicly for other people to read. And I have to say, some of the public letters I've read so far have been touching and emotional, but then also quite hilarious as well. Either way, you can still share your letters with a shareable link. Plus, when you do receive your letter, you're actually able to respond to your past self in something that's called an epilogue. And I find this feature really sweet because it's ending the story that started from your past self. And I just love the ability to set aside time to reflect on your personal growth. And plus, haven't we all thought about where we'd like to be a year or 2 from now, and being able to receive something from your past self, just checking in to see if you've actually accomplished them? But honestly, a year or 2 from now, I'd probably still be spending most of my time reading books, so not much might change. However, I hope that I have published a book by that time. And so if you'd like to take the time to reflect and write a letter to your future self, then you can use the link in my description to go to Future Me's website, or download their app for iOS and Android. Either way, it's completely free. And so yeah, going back to Charlie's bookshelf, I have all 4 books right here that I'm planning to read for today's video. And so the first one on the agenda is A Boy Meets Boy by David Leviathan. This one I've heard a lot of things about, some good, some bad. The next one I'll then be reading is Only on the Weekends by Dean Atta. I have wanted to read The Black Flamingo for a while. However, when I saw this on Charlie's bookshelf, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read this. The third book I'm then gonna read is When You Call My Name by Tucker Shaw. This one I was actually recommended by Candy, who's one of my friends at at Penguin, and she was just like, you're literally gonna love this book so much. And so I'm gonna hold Candy to that and see if I actually do love this book, because otherwise I will have serious doubt in the way that she judges my reading taste. And finally, the last book I'll then be reading for this video is This Place is Still Beautiful by Gigi Tian. And I am just really looking forward to reading this as well, because it seems like from the synopsis it has this balance between discussions on racism and hate crimes, but then also trying to interweave this kind of like summer romancy plot as well. So I feel like it's going to be a sort of like coming of age kind of novel. I'm just really excited to like delve into all of those books and then delve into like why Charlie would have acquired these books for his bookshelf. I definitely want to recommend him some books at the end as well, like I did with Isaac. I think it'll definitely be a very cool and interesting experience. And so yeah, I'm gonna get to reading all of those books, and I'll get back with you with each book that I finish, giving my whole thoughts and feelings, and then we'll just wrap it up in the end. So yeah, let's get started. Oh, and of course, if you had any doubt in your mind, of course I'm gonna match my outfits to the books. This is my channel after all. With this book, I literally could not wait to finish it, and you know, it's not for a good reason. And so I finished Boy Meets Boy by David Leviathan, and whilst it was able to deliver a queer normative narrative that can fill your heart with joy, I unfortunately did not like this as much as I wanted to. So Boy Meets Boy basically follows Paul, who in his queer normative town develops a crush on another boy called Noah. Paul may or may not blow his chances with Noah numerous times throughout this book, but during this, Paul's friends also experience their own struggles of coming to terms with their sexuality or just living with religious parents. However, between finding and also losing love, sometimes things just need to break apart in order to fit together in the right way. Okay, so in the words of my sister trying a pumpkin spice latte, it was good, but it's not great. It just has the unfortunate precedence of being awfully mediocre. Like, there was nothing really special about this book, but I think I will commend it for being one of the queerest books that I have read that has been published in the early 2000s, and I don't dismiss the fact that this book probably meant a lot to kids growing up at the time. And whilst the town and setting that Boy Meets Boy is set in is quite unrealistic, and some people may say that's a detriment to the book, I actually think it's quite nice, as this is a work of fiction. Like, let's remind ourselves of that. And so having this like queer normative space can actually provide a safe escape for queer people who want to just experience that for once in their life. Like, not everything has to be filled with like pain and like homophobia, you know? However, whilst I did enjoy the town, that was basically the best part of the book with me, as everything else I kind of had an issue with. Between kind of like this ambivalent beginning with like no real introduction to the characters or like their personalities or lack thereof personalities, it was hard enough trying to get into like this 200-ish page book. From like the rushed relationship between Paul and Noah and lacking really much development to like the rushed, very rushed ending of this book, there was just not a lot for me to grab. There wasn't really much showing as such. There was parts of telling, and telling is okay in some instances, and showing obviously is always okay in most instances, and I feel like this was just too much telling and things needed to be shown. And as such, there was not a lot for me to fall in love with, and I just wish there was more. Overall, I think that's why Noah was probably my favorite character in this book, because everyone kind of either conformed to an archetype or were just not developed well enough for my liking. I cared about them a little, but like it wasn't enough for me to be invested in this story. Plus, there was this there was this like whole messy like cheating storyline that didn't really get resolved well, and like it's not really dealt with in the best way, which shows, yeah, like lives are messy, but like you know, yeah. But despite this, there are moments where David Leviathan's writing shines, especially in the parts where he writes that I could point out that it isn't always easy knowing who you are and what you want, because then you have no excuse for not trying to get it. And basically that plays into like my gifted child syndrome, where I'm basically like, if I want something, I will work really hard in order to get it, and then my ADHD's like, you will hyperfixate on this until you get it, and then I get it, and then I basically lose immediate interest. Yeah, I'm dealing with it. Overall, I think Charlie would read this because he'd probably want to see like the history of queer literature and seeing like how far it's gone. Plus, I do feel like this would probably be prescribed reading in like early high school years, and so I feel like this is probably something he's owned for a few years now and has just kept on his bookshelf. And plus, he probably has like a bunch of annotations on the inside where he's like, it's just like nostalgic to look back at. So yeah, that's basically my feelings on Boy Meets Boy. 2 stars is probably good for this. But now I'll be moving on to the next book. Hello, make no mistake, it's literally like later on in the afternoon because this book took me 2-ish hours to read. It is thick, but because of the way this novel is written, it actually is a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be, and so because I listened to Audible at 3.5 times speed, I finished Only on the Weekends by Dean Atter, and I enjoyed parts of this story. I didn't enjoy other parts of this story, but I just came out of reading this book like I was misled by the cover. I don't know how to feel about that. There's something in me that's like, I wish it turned out differently. However, for the story, I can see why it turned out the way that it did. However, I feel misled. So Only on the Weekends follows 15-year-old Mac, who's a hopeless romantic with a crush on Kareem, or Kay. But when Kay finally starts reciprocating his feelings and the two start dating, Mac has to move away to Scotland for his father because his father's a director and he's working on this new film. Their long-distance relationship is quite painful and they're only able to see each other on the weekends. But when Mac meets Finley, who is one of the actors on the set, Mac's world turns upside down as Finley's fearlessness could just as well be infectious, and being caught between these two boys might not end entirely well. And so for this one, I'm immediately delving into why Charlie would have read this, and I'm putting this directly onto Ben Hope and also partially Nick Nelson as well, because Mac kind of experiences a similar relationship experience to what Charlie experiences through the start of his relationships, where he's kind of like dating this closeted boy who's not really ready to come out yet. However, the way that Mac's relationship goes with Kay versus the way that it goes with Ben are vastly different. I think the way that Nick and Kay are kind of similar, but also different in their own respective ways. And so whilst things play out quite differently, I feel like there is some similarities that can draw an immediate comparison. And this isn't a major spoiler, but there are moments where Kay basically keeps asking Mac to meet up in order to kiss in private, which basically made me worried that he was going to be like a Ben Hope type of character. However, this is quickly proven not to be the case. And I feel like Charlie would have really resonated with some of the things that Mac was saying towards Kay, as Mac was being like, so you get to feel invincible, but I've got to stay invisible. As for what I think about this book, I do have mixed feelings. In terms of the structure, I actually read another novel in verse lately, and I really loved the way that it was conveying the story, and this is no different. Like, I really enjoyed the way that Dean Atter was able to like convey the tale and like use language in such like an interesting way in order to spin this narrative. This book is split into 4 parts. However, parts 1, 2, and 4 basically do not make up enough of the length to cover part 3, and part 3 is basically a book in and of itself, and so it felt like there was definitely like an unbalanced sense to this book as well because of the way the parts were structured. So I wasn't really a massive fan of that either. I feel like there could have been a part down the middle of like part 3. Apart from that though, this book deals with like racism, homophobia, the intersection of the two, but then also elements of like toxic and fragile masculinity as well. And I found all the way Atta explored them to be quite poignant in the book. I was able to resonate a lot through this book, especially being like a black queer person as well. It was affirming in a way to see that I wasn't alone in the way that I felt, but then also it did help me root for these characters further in their struggles. And I did love quite a few of these characters. However, Mac, I had an issue with. There was just something about his personality that I couldn't mesh with. I'm kind of sad about that because I really did want to like him, and there were moments where he was likable. Whilst I do appreciate he does make pretty questionable choices, as like YA doesn't always need to have the morally good protagonist. He is a child. He will make flawed choices. I feel like with the rushed ending the book provides, there is no kind of room for Mac to grow properly, especially with what happens near the end of this book. I feel like there should have been a moment of something more. I just needed something more from this book near the end for it to like properly allow for a great payoff, and I just didn't have that. But overall, I still enjoyed what this story had to offer, and I still really enjoyed listening to it as well, and I'm still really inclined to check out Atta's other works. And you know, it just made me more inspired to check out more novels in verse and see what they have to offer. But for now, on to the next book. Hey besties, you may be wondering what I'm doing, and I'm essentially drafting the invoice that I'm gonna have to send to Tucker Shaw for the therapy that I'm gonna need after finishing this book. So, I finished When You Call My Name, and the pain that I have felt has been, like in a good way. This is a good book. This is an excellent book. And I think the first thing that I want to say before I immediately get into the synopsis of this book is that if you've watched Pose the TV show and loved that TV show, I will urge you to also read this book, because So, When You Call My Name essentially follows the dual perspective of film fanatic Adam and fashion-obsessed Ben in the year of 1990 in New York City during the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Adam has just been asked out on his first date with Callum, but as his romance with him blossoms, Adam soon discovers that the guy he's falling in love with is very ill. And it's here that Adam meets Ben, who's basically looking to explore his queerness for the very first time and live openly queer after being kicked out by his mother. And the two of them change each other's lives as they open each other's eyes up to the possibilities of queer love and life, and exemplify the fact that through the messiness of life in and of itself, you can really find a family who can see and help you see the real you. It is a novel of people breaking apart, but also the people that can help put them back together. This story is such an important read in and of itself. It was emotional, and I think a lot of the feelings that I had whilst watching Pose definitely came back in this book, and so I did cry once or twice. It was definitely a hard-hitting read, and there were definitely points where it does take quite a bit out of you, and you sometimes might feel the need to step away from it, but also it doesn't fail to like highlight the pain, but also uplift the joy as well, and that we don't forget the people who have died during this epidemic. It was a really insightful and interesting read, but also one that had such emotional intensity that Shaw's writing just like exemplified throughout the entire thing. The way that he was able to craft these like rich passages and like really get you to feel for Ben and also Adam, more importantly, during this book. Adam's relationship with Callum was definitely one that filled me with a lot of happiness, and then that happiness very quickly turned to pain, and then that pain very quickly turned to like a bit of catharsis. And I feel like throughout it, like the pain that we experience isn't a detriment to the book, because you feel the joy and you feel their pain. And as one of the characters in the book says, one day the air will change and the sun will feel good on your face again, and when it does, I want you to let it. It won't be a betrayal, it won't mean you stop caring, I promise. And I just feel like that quote in and of itself is just like, yes, there is pain now, and yes, someone you love has gone, but the moment you begin to be able to like start living your life again, it isn't that you've forgotten them or that you've completely moved on from them, it's just that you're now ready to live your life. And, you know, it's not selfish to do that. And, like, whilst I did really enjoy this book, I do feel like it was a little heavy-handed in the cultural and pop cultural references of the 1990s, because I feel like it definitely wanted to, like, solidify its establishment of, like, this scene that it was in as a piece of, like, historical fiction. Whilst that was appreciated, I feel like it could have definitely dialed it back a bit. However, I can also see why it wanted to, like, overemphasize it, because of a young adult audience probably wouldn't have much idea of a lot of the stuff that went on in the the year 1990. It's a slight detriment, but it's not too bad. However, this book definitely was a tribute to queer history, and I would definitely say this is one of the more impactful reads that I've read this year, and definitely is one of my favorite young adult reads that I've read so far this year. And so I am really happy to have read this, and Candy was right in the fact that she does know my taste. As for why Charlie would own this, I think it's immediately apparent that Charlie owns a lot of queer books, both fiction and non-fiction, and so I feel like reading like a fictionalized account of a real piece of queer history would probably add an extra sense of empathy for him, and also I think learning about it would help him appreciate the queer people that came before him as well, and so I'm very happy about that. And so yeah, let us move on to the final book of today's video. Okay, so I bought this shirt recently from the Urban Outfitters like vintage section. This collar is a bit big, but like if I do it up in its entirety, does it seem like weird at all? Okay, no, I actually kind of like that. But anyway, I chose this shirt because of the images it has of like houses and like the slight gold of this cover. It's not the main color, but it works. I finished This Place Is Still Beautiful by Gigi Tian, and I really enjoyed this book. I just think this is just such an excellent YA novel in the way that it conducts itself in terms of theme, in terms of character, in terms of plot, and also structure as well. Let's not forget structure. But the one thing that I will say about this book, more specifically the UK version, is that this is the US cover. Yeah, that's all I need to say about that. Like, I do love the cover that Jian Lu has done. However, I just feel like the US cover I prefer a lot more. And so This Place Is Still Beautiful follows two sisters, Margaret and Alalie, who after witnessing a hate crime basically take two very different different stances on the matter. Whilst Margaret refuses to let this injustice go and tries to speak up about the matter, Annalee essentially just wants to fade into the background and just remain silent about it, as she doesn't want her summer with her first love to be ruined. As tensions rise and the relationship between Margaret and Annalee gets worse, a crushing secret threatens to tear them apart forever. And so I think that this is definitely one of the books that you'll want to sit with for a while after reading. However, I don't have such a luxury with the fact that I am creating this video, and so I'm basically gonna try and give you my immediate thoughts. And this is definitely an important book that highlights like racism and many facets of it, such as like the model minority myth and the complicated issues of perceived whiteness. And I just think this book does really well in displaying those issues. But also it does delve into like elements of the toxic relationships, and family is at the very core of this novel. And I feel like the synopsis, whilst it does play into like the hate crime racism bit, the major story is essentially a coming of age story between Margaret and Annalee, as both of these girls essentially have to like analyze the way they respond to this hate crime and also the way they conduct themselves and act in society. And it's just interesting to see the journeys that both sisters go on throughout this novel and just see the decisions that they make. It basically reckons with what it means to grow up, and also to grow up and realize things about your identity that you've either forgotten about or didn't realize until now. I love it when dual points of view make total sense within a book. Like with What Happened When You Call My Name, I think This Place Is Still Beautiful really does well in the dual POV department, as getting into the mindsets of both Margaret and Annalee really served the story well, as we really got insight into what each sister was feeling and reacting to. Being only 2 years apart in age, it really shows a striking difference between the ways that these sisters have responded to things, influenced by their own experiences and history. And this is only further emphasized in the world building. I know this is a contemporary, but there's world building that is like related to the personal history of the characters, as they're always reminded of like the echoes and of the past. And I think this perfectly encapsulates one of the quotes in the novel that says, "My home and this place that shaped who I am. Rejecting it would feel like rejecting a part of myself." And Shishi Tian was able to like flesh out the characters and the world simultaneously, like embellishing it with lavish prose that was really able to allow me to sink deeper into the story. Don't get me wrong, Margaret and Annalee are flawed characters in and of themselves. However, I feel like the way that they challenge race and challenge the family dynamic really comes across well. And you know, I really just now want more books with complicated sister relationships, because I just feel like there's something about that dynamic that I just find so interesting, and I really enjoy it, like we get in like Little Women. And so why would Charlie have this book on his bookshelf? Well, I feel like it's because of Tao. Aside from Charlie probably having an interest in the story, I think Charlie is also aware of the rise of like anti-Asian hate crimes that are going on. I think Charlie reading this book is a way for him to read outside of his perspective and like gain an understanding of like how people feel about being subjected to these hate crimes without directly asking Tao about it, therefore putting him in a vulnerable position. And I think for that, Charlie is really great in my headcanon version of why he was reading this book anyway. But yeah, we've now basically read 4 books from Charlie's bookshelf. And so what do I feel overall? I couldn't find the exact green that Charlie's bedroom wall is in my wardrobe, so I've essentially just like worn a green shirt that kind of gives the vibe of Charlie's bedroom wall. I do not have a light up neon sign that says music, however, I have my charming personality. So, I have read 4 books that were on Charlie Spring's bookshelf, and so do I think he has taste? Yes. To an extent. I feel like I've had a divided experience, as there were some books that I really loved and enjoyed, and then there were some books that I were either mixed on or just didn't really like whatsoever. And I feel like through like his friendship with Isaac and exploring his reading tastes more, he's definitely going to be able to pick out books that I will like a lot more. And whilst there are books that I don't like from his bookshelf, I feel like that only really goes to show the differences in readers, and also like how we all have different tastes. Like with Isaac in his video, I didn't really like some of the books that he read, and that was literally because either I was too dumb to comprehend quantum mechanics, or there were just elements of the story that I wasn't really enjoying. But those characters, those people loved those books, and I can't take that away from them. I can't take away their joy and what they felt about that, unless it's an author who has been intentionally transphobic towards trans people, and then erases their identities, and then publishes a book going after basically every community that basically went against her on Twitter just to try and prove a point about chronically online people. And you know, I think it's right to take away some people's enjoyment of a particular series. But anyways, that's not about that. That's just about unnecessary things. And so I do hope that Isaac does recommend Charlie some books, because whilst he does have kind of like out there taste, he can provide some good reads. Oh. I can't believe I just did that. And so, I have 3 books that I would love to recommend Charlie. So the very first one is Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating by Adiba Jagirda. This is the winner of the YA Book Prize 2022. And I had the utmost pleasure of judging this book and really falling in love with Hani and Ishu's characters as they go through this kind of like fake dating scenario. And this not only speaks to a few of the issues surrounding racism and white victimhood, but also I just feel like this really sold such a good story. And so yeah, that's the first book. The second book that I then recommend to Charlie is Ace of Spades by Frida Abike Iminde. This is like a thriller, like Gossip Girl meets Get Out, but it's with queer characters as well. And so I feel like diversifying Charlie's tastes a bit to go outside of like kind of the contemporary sphere would be very interesting to see, so that he can like start exploring other genres whilst also having elements of books that he enjoys, aka queerness. And then finally, this is an adult book. However, I feel like Charlie would still enjoy it because of the queerness, but also just like the story in and of itself. And so we have A Marvelous Light by Freya Mask, which is basically about like an English magician and an English non-magician as they kind of try and figure out a conspiracy about magic in and of itself. And they're drawn together because of unexpected circumstances, and it's gay. And I just think Charlie would kind of enjoy this. And so yeah, I'd also want to know what books you'd recommend Charlie Spring to read. And so I'd love for you to leave them down in the comment section down below so we can like exchange book recommendations and see like what other books we can use to fill up Charlie's bookshelf with. Finally, again, I'm really excited to see like kind of what books come up in season 2 of Heartstopper, especially kind of like what Isaac reads, but then also if any other characters begin to read as well. Or if we have any like episodes where like they go into like a French Parisian bookstore, they have to go to Shakespeare and Company in Paris. I've never been, but I will romanticize myself going through watching them go. But yeah, I feel like that would be great. And so yeah, thank you so much for joining me today on this journey. It's been so much fun. And again, a massive thank you to Future Me for sponsoring today's video. If you want to send a letter to your future self, then you can use the link in my description to go and do that, because you should really invest in that personal relationship with yourself, and it's absolutely free as well. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here, be sure to click that subscribe button so you're notified whenever I upload next. We are creeping ever so closely to the 100k mark, and my heart cannot take this anymore. If you want to find me on any other social medias, I'll have them linked in the description down below for you, so you can follow me on every single other platform. And yeah, I just feel like now that I've done this, I can finally start packing this away slowly, because yeah, I really need to start packing. I need to start packing. And I mentioned this last video, but I'm gonna mention it now as well, because it's probably gonna motivate me to start packing. But yeah, I guess until the next time, bye besties.